Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Hey, one of my goals, I think, on my videos is to start to do a few more like player spotlights and or videos around the times, eras, things like that, as opposed to just showing cards I picked up and or graded. And this is going to be my first attempt, and I am going to start with a gentleman you see in the background, Henry Aaron. And I believe he's underrated, and I know that's hard for people to take in right away, right? How do you consider Henry Aaron to be underrated? But I'll tell you, and here's why. Anytime I hear the greatest players of all time, I always see Henry Aaron ranked behind the other two guys on this card, which are Babe Ruth and Willie Mays. But in addition to that, I've also heard and seen where people also rank him behind Barry Bonds, behind Ty Cobb, behind Mickey Mantle, right? And I've seen him go all the way to fifth, but I never see anybody say Henry Aaron was the best player of all time. Major league player of all time, I should say. I'm going to say that because, there were a lot of Negro League players that I would have to do a lot more research on, but from a major league perspective, nobody ever says Henry's the best. And I think he should be in that conversation, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't believe Henry gets as much credit, and I think there's a couple reasons. One, he just wasn't an overly spectacular player. He was a great athlete, and he did things, and he made things look really, really easy. So, I think especially hitting, if you watch videos of him hitting, it's just such a smooth swing. And it just looks easy, looks effortless. I think the other thing that you'll see if you look at these cards here, right, he played the majority of his career in Milwaukee and then in Atlanta, neither of which were really hotbeds for baseball, right? The guys he's going up with, the Mantles, the Ruths, the Mays, they played the majority of their career in New York or in larger markets. And I just think the media has a lot to do with how players are seen in the eyes of, all-time greatness. I would tell you the third thing I think that cost him was this right here. I think Henry Aaron chasing the all-time home run record really cost him quite a bit. I think people just think of him as a home run hitter, which he wasn't, and they don't take into consideration his fielding or his base running or his all-around excellence as a hitter. So, back to this card right here, I would tell you that he played in the same generation as Mays, and people consider Mays the best player of their generation. And then he played the same position as Babe Ruth, and a lot of people would say he was the second best right fielder. And I could argue that he might have even been better. So we're gonna dive into that. The first thing I want to talk about is his defense, right? Defensively, he just doesn't get enough credit for how good he was. He won 3 consecutive Gold Gloves. I think it was like 58 through 60 as a right fielder. He would have won more Gold Gloves, but another one of his contemporaries was this guy right here, Roberto Clemente, who was the best fielding right fielder I think ever played the game. So, he just didn't get as many Gold Gloves because of that, but he was a great fielder who had 3 Gold Gloves. Consecutive years in a row he had Gold Gloves. Understanding defense in his era was really more of an estimated guess, but at the end of the day, Baseball Reference ranks him as the 9th all-time among right fielders based on runs saved at 98. He was always in the top 2 or 3 in statistics that figured out your range factor. And Eddie Matthews, one of his teammates, his quote was, he never threw the wrong base or missed a cutoff man. So people don't realize that he wasn't just a decent fielder. He was a great fielder. 3-time Gold Glove, probably would have won more. Let's talk about base running. From a base running perspective, he ran the bases as well as anybody. More importantly, though, were his stolen bases. And I don't think people give Mr. Aaron enough credit for his stolen bases. So he stole 240 bases in his career. He was the 3rd player to go 30-30 behind Willie Mays and Ken Williams. And the bigger thing is he didn't start running. He played for a team, the Milwaukee Braves, that only ran 25 to 35 times a year as a team, stole bases, 25 to 35 bases a year. He didn't really start stealing bases till his fifth year in the league, but from 1959 to 1968, he stole 203 bases, seventh most during that time, and actually more than this guy here, Willie Mays. So he actually stole more bases during that time, but more importantly was his success rate. During that same span of 10 years, he was successful 80% of the time, which was the best in the major leagues at that time. And over his career, Henry Aaron was successful 76% of the time stealing bases. He had a better success rate than Jackie Robinson, Maury Wills, Lou Brock, and yes, Willie Mays. So people don't realize what a great base runner this guy was. You know, from a WAR perspective, Bad Henry, he was fifth all-time in WAR, but he's tied with Barry Bonds with 16 seasons of a WAR over 6. And he's second to Barry Bonds with 13 seasons with a WAR over 7. So he's just a really consistent, great player. And then when we start talking about hitting, once again, you know, I think he doesn't get the credit because of the home runs for what a great all-around hitter this guy was. And as far as runs scored, 2,174 ranks him fourth all-time. Hits, his 3,771 hits rank him only behind Pete Rose and Ty Cobb. He's number 3 on that list. He's number 13 in all-time doubles with 624. He's second in home runs with 755. He's got the number 1 RBI total in all of baseball, 2,297. He's got the most runs, combined runs, which is runs and RBIs, of 4,471. And he's got a 305 batting average lifetime. And the last 3 like really major stats I would tell you from Mr. Aaron are these. One, there's only one player in all of baseball that has ever had 2,000 runs, over 2,000 runs, 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, 2,000 RBIs, 200 stolen bases, and a 300 batting average. And that's Henry Aaron. Every other great player fell short in one of those categories. Willie Mays fell short in RBIs, Babe Ruth fell short in hits, A-Rod fell short in a couple categories. Think about the consistency of how great a hitter you had to be to put up those numbers. But the bigger ones, the 2 I think that really stand out in my mind are total bases. He had 6,856 total bases. That's 700 more than the next best player, which is Stan Musial, also another great underrated player. And for Musial to have passed Willie Mays, he would have had to have hit another 181 home runs. For Barry Bonds to tie Willie Mays in total bases, he would have needed 220 more home runs. Babe Ruth could have hit 250 more home runs and he wouldn't have caught Henry Aaron in total bases. And Pete Rose, the all-time hits leader, he could have had 1,100 more singles and he still wouldn't have caught Aaron's all-time record. My favorite stat, though, of this guy is if you were to take away his 755 home runs, he still would have had over 3,016 base hits. So he still would have been a member of the 3,000 hit club without his home runs. And he would have been ahead, he still would have had more career hits than players like Cap Anson, Wade Boggs, Al Kaline, and Roberto Clemente. He would have ranked 30th all-time in hits without his home runs. And remember, he played in the major leagues when his career was at a time when pitcher stats were great. He played at a pitcher's time, and he played in a pitcher's ballpark for the majority of his stats. They say if they would have neutralized his stats, he probably would have had closer to 824 home runs and 7,500 total base hits. And I'll leave you off with, one other thing I just wanted to say is postseason wise, that's probably another reason why he didn't get the credit. He only played in 3 postseason games, but when he did play in the postseason, he had a very productive career in the postseason. He hit 362 with 6 home runs, 16 RBIs in 17 games. So he was a really good player. From the age 35 to 39, he was such a consistent player. I think part of his knock, is that he played more games than other people. And there were 2 reasons, right? Early in his career, he would only miss an average of 4 games a year. And then later in his career, when other people were waning, he continued to be productive. From age 35 to 39, he averaged 40.6 home runs a year, 101.2 RBIs, and a 299 batting average. Think about that. And the last thing I'll leave you with, and it was a longer paragraph, but I'll just paraphrase it a bit. When they asked Pie Traynor, about comparing him to Willie Mays, he said, "I'd take Aaron any day over Willie Mays." And then he ended that paragraph by saying, "You don't hear much about Hank, yet he was as good a fielder, runner, and a steadier and better hitter." So, I know this is going to spark some debate, and I get how good Willie Mays was, and I get how good Babe Ruth was, and I could make the same argument for them. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think either of those guys are as underappreciated as Henry Aaron. I just think he should be always in the conversation for the greatest Major League Baseball player that ever lived. And he could do it all around. He was a 5-tool player. So there you have it. Let me know what you think. I'd love to see some comments. This is something I'd like to do more. I'll talk about different players in different eras, and I'm going to start it out with my favorite player, Henry Aaron. So I appreciate you watching. Have a great day. Stay safe. Keep collecting. Thanks.